I thought I was going to be waking up to watch the last few episodes of Fruits Baskets, but instead, I checked my Instagram and woke up to this. Yes. So the U.S. has submitted a draft resolution to the UN Security Council calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. So I want to know what actually has been said. What's the tea? What's the full tea? What's the climate looking like? And what motivated them to do that when just last month they were saying, oh no, we can't have a ceasefire. We support Israel. Okay, let's go.
In my travels to the region, we've met intensively with virtually all of our regional partners from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, from Jordan, from the UAE, from Qatar, Palestinian Authority. But I very much appreciate the foreign minister hosting today's meeting with the Arab foreign ministers. I've been meeting and speaking individually to them over the past several weeks, but it was very good to be together, to have the opportunity to convene as a group, to share views on where we are, where we need to go, and how we can best get there. And there's a clear consensus around a number of shared priorities. First, the need for an immediate, sustained ceasefire with the release of hostages.
They're still doing that sustained ceasefire thing.
That would create space to surge more humanitarian assistance, to relieve the suffering of many people, and to build something more enduring. We've been working, as you know, with Egypt, with Qatar, and with Israel to put a strong proposal on the table. Hamas responded to that. The negotiators continue to work. The gaps are narrowing, and we're continuing to push for an agreement in Doha. There's still difficult work to get there, but I continue to believe it's possible. The United States has also put forward the United Nations Security Council resolution to support these efforts, and we hope that all countries will back that resolution. Second, there's an agreement, as you heard from Minister Shukri, on the urgent need to surge and sustain humanitarian assistance.
We're going to talk about that as well.
Children should not be dying of malnutrition in Gaza or anywhere else for that matter. 100% of the population of Gaza
Do they have a filter?
is experiencing severe levels of acute.
Do they have a filter on his face? Or do they have I'm like not kidding, this is actually really weird. Or is he wearing like very thick makeup? Because he does not generally look like this. He looks very refreshed. I was like, is he going to be looking like he usually does? Like, oh my God, what have I done? Or is he going to be looking like whatever? But he looks very fresh today.
Food insecurity. We must not allow that to continue. Now, the ceasefire that we're working on would be the best, most immediate way to enable us to surge humanitarian assistance, but it's not the only way.
We've literally been saying that for ages.
Regardless.
It's not the only way. What's the other way?
We've seen some improvement over the last couple of weeks in getting humanitarian assistance to Palestinians, but it's not enough. And as I said, we need to really surge and sustain the assistance across land, across sea, and across air. We have senior officials meeting today in Cyprus to coordinate the international efforts on the maritime corridor. And that includes support for the U.S. military mission to construct a pier, a temporary pier, as an additional channel for aid. But as I said before, and I want to emphasize, this maritime corridor and this pier is a complement to, not a substitute for, other means of getting assistance to people who need it. And in particular, the land crossings are the most critical means of getting aid.
They're literally blocking it, not just like Israel,
Mr.
but like the
Shukri said,
citizens of Israel.
We agreed today, all of the ministers, that we would get our experts together in the coming days to identify the urgent, practical, and concrete steps that can and should be taken to increase the flow of assistance. Israel needs to do more. Tomorrow, I'll be talking to our partners about how to coordinate our efforts. As the foreign minister mentioned as well, we also discussed Rafah. We all share concerns. There are more than 1 million people in Rafah, many of whom were displaced from other parts of Gaza.
Apparently they're already there.
A major ground operation there would mean more civilian deaths. It would worsen the humanitarian crisis. There is a
started
better
a ground
way
operation
to deal with the threat, the ongoing threat posed by Hamas. Third, we discussed and agreed on the need for long-term peace and security. This discussion very much consistent with the principles that I laid out in Tokyo many months ago, that Gaza cannot be used as a platform for terrorism. There can be no displacement of its population.
Israel is a terrorist.
There can be no
the IDF is a terrorist
reoccupation
organization. It's a terrorist state,
Israel.
and it should not be used as
and we also agreed
their playground.
that this requires a path to two states with real security guarantees for Israel.
Two states.
In turn,
no.
This also requires real reform of the Palestinian Authority. And we've seen some initial steps in that direction. More is needed. Revitalizing the PA with a better, more representative government. If and as the Palestinian Authority pursues reform, I'm also convinced that the region will strongly support it. Regional integration is one of the building blocks of lasting peace and lasting security.
Yeah, that's why you can't have two-state solution
for Israel with its neighbors.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday, I had an opportunity to meet again with Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman, as well as with the foreign minister. And we had a very good discussion about the work that we've been doing for many months now on normalization, and that work is moving forward. We're continuing to make good progress. I believe we can reach an agreement which would present a historic opportunity for two nations, but also for the region as a whole.
So this is some motherfucking lip service, to say the least. So when I first looked this up, I was like, okay, what are the details of that ceasefire deal that you want to come up with? Like, what's on it? What does it look like? How is that going to benefit them? They have been saying immediate ceasefire because that's what we've been calling for, by the way. The only reason why this is happening is because we have been demanding it as the people, as American citizens. We have been demanding it. And because let's have a look at the polling. Okay. Let's have a look specifically on the polling in Israel. In the last video that I posted, I put up the ones calling for de-escalation of violence in Gaza. However, it's even worse than I thought. So first and foremost, Joe Biden's approval ratings are in the absolute garbage. They're in hell. Okay. So 57% of, here, I can show you here, 57% are disapproving of his actions, 36% are approving. And so that leaves about 7% that are kind of like, ambivalent. On top of that, as we can see here specifically, which is the chart, the polls that I put up in regards to people calling for a permanent ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza, 67% of all voters, and this is back in February. Okay, this is the end of February. So this has not been updated yet, but we'll continue with this. So 67% are in support of that. 77% of Democrats, 69% of independent or third party, Republicans, 56%, like a majority of them. And it seems to be literally the majority of people in general. So 68% of people under 45. Yeah, they want to talk about millennials and all that type of shit. Millennials and Gen Z that are like that. But 67% of 45 plus people. So Gen X and the boomers. Come on now. Okay, fast forward. So this is the people calling for a permanent ceasefire, not just immediate, sustained, all of these little words that you want to qualify the ceasefire with so that you can say, oh, well, we didn't say a permanent one. Okay, we're going to talk about that too. Okay, we're going to talk about that. But I'm getting really heated right now. I'm really heated. Anyway, so they said, so 74% of them, all likely voters, support the U.S. calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, including a release of the hostages. 83% of Democrats, 78% of independent third party, 63% of Republicans. Okay, after hearing arguments from both sides, voters continue to believe the U.S. should call for a permanent ceasefire, literally permanent ceasefire. Okay, permanent ceasefire. All voters, 65%. And Democrats, what is that? 78%. Independents, 71%. Republicans, okay, whatever. Leave them behind, whatever. So 48%. So I also want to show you guys what his polling data is looking like today as of 11:54 a.m. So his disapproval ratings is 40.27 40 his approval rating is 40.2. Disapproval 54.6. This is really, really bad. Relative to other presidents during this time, he's lower than literally every other president. Literally every other president. Look at this. Look at this. Minus Truman. Okay, minus Truman. This is after World War II. So that says a lot. I kind of want to hear some commentary about this. And so what exactly that means, what it looks like, and all of that.
Let's get more with our diplomatic editor, James Space, who joins us on the line. So, James, what more are you hearing about this U.S. resolution?
Well, these comments have come from Secretary of State Blinken in the last half hour and clearly sound very important indeed. What we need to know is the exact language of the UN Security Council resolution to which he's referring. And I can tell you that Al Jazeera has obtained a copy of the latest, we thought it was the latest US Security Council draft just a few hours ago. And this is, I think, where the language is important, because he's talking, when he spoke to reporters a short time ago, about an immediate ceasefire. And the resolution, the copy we've seen, does use the words immediate and sustained ceasefire. But this is where it gets complicated, and this is important. The language you have says the Security Council determines the imperative of an immediate and sustained ceasefire to protect civilians on all sides. Now, determines the imperative means that an immediate and sustained ceasefire the Security Council believes is important. What other members of the Security Council want is an immediate demand for one to take place. And it's not clear in this resolution that that's actually what the US is demanding. And I have to be honest with you, it's not clear whether this copy of the resolution that Al Jazeera obtained just a couple of hours ago is the copy that Secretary of State Blinken is talking about. It may well be. This is a fluid document. It's being updated all the time, but the language has been changed. It is certainly the strongest draft that I have seen with regard to the situation in Gaza, demanding immediate aid, go into Gaza, talking about international humanitarian law being complied with. It is a lengthy document. This is something the US has
What
been
the hell is
working
going on with the ICJ?
For some weeks now, and it's been constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Certainly the strongest language yet. But is it quite what the rest of the Security Council want, a demand for an immediate ceasefire, or is it just a resolution where the Security Council would say an immediate ceasefire is something that's very important, and he may then, of course, be able to refer to the ongoing talks that are taking place in Doha to try and get a 6-week ceasefire.
As you say, James, strong
6 weeks,
language,
not permanent.
In this draft resolution that the U.S. is putting forward. And this is, of course, a significant change, it would appear, given the U.S.'s previous vetoes at the Security Council on Gaza.
Yes, for 3 times we've had the U.S. representative in the Security Council raise their arm in veto against the rest of the Security Council. Only the UK has been on 2 of those resolutions, not supporting the resolution, in abstention.
As a black woman, I don't claim her.
The US is the only one that, with veto powers, blocked those resolutions. The Security Council would have called for an immediate ceasefire at the end of last year if it hadn't been for the United States. And I know from diplomats in New York and elsewhere that there's been considerable concern about this among the Security Council, but also, I think, among the U.S. diplomatic community. Senior diplomats have told me they believe that the U.S. ambassador herself, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, has been uneasy about the U.S. position and has been advocating for the U.S. to take a stronger position given the scale of the deaths caused by Israel's bombardment.
So what is the exact wording? Now, I went to the UN website to try to find if it was up there yet. No, it's a draft resolution. I guess it's not going to be, there's not even like a link to it when you go and check the website. But anyway, so obviously that's what they're saying so far. I kind of want to go into the proposal that's being worked on between Israel and Hamas at the moment. So while Hamas is pushing for a permanent ceasefire, Israel still plans to invade Rafah amid mounting international pressure. Okay, so this is the proposal that Hamas has put forward. These are like the key terms of it. Israeli captives would be released in exchange for Palestinian prisoners, 100 of whom are serving life sentences. Nearly 100 captives are believed to be in custody of Hamas and other Palestinian factions. The ceasefire would be divided into 3 stages, each lasting 42 days, so that's 6 weeks. During the first stage, Israeli forces must withdraw from al-Rashid Salah al-Din streets, the 2 main highways connecting the south and the north, to allow for the return of displaced Palestinians to their homes and delivery of aid in Gaza. Whew. It just reminds me of Bisan, and she's saying, I just want to go home. Like, I just want to go back to the north, you know?
I just want to go back to my home.
I just want to go. She lives in Gaza City, that's where she's from, and she just wants to go back home. Captives released first would be women and children. In exchange for 700 to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners would be released. Hamas said that for the release of 1 Israeli female reservist captive, 50 Palestinian prisoners of its choosing, including 30 who were serving life sentences, should be freed. More than 200 Palestinian prisoners and 80 Israeli captives were released as part of a 1-week truce in November. However, many of the Palestinians have since been rearrested. In a second phase, a permanent ceasefire must be declared before any more captives are released. The third stage would involve Israel lifting the siege on Gaza and initiating the rebuilding of the enclave. I think that's really good. And we are going to talk about what Israel has to say. So Benjamin Netanyahu is saying that they're unrealistic demands. Netanyahu has said that Israel still plans to invade Rafah, the last and southernmost refuge of Palestinians who fled months of Israeli bombardment, to release its goal of defeating Hamas. But his plans have faced opposition from Arab nations, aid agencies, as well as its allies, Washington. They said that they do not start no ground operations there, but I believe, if I remember correctly and if I find it, they have already begun ground operations. Not a massive scale. Oh, they just like when they bombed Rafah. Let's think about that first and foremost. It's pretty much a refugee camp, tent city, all that type of stuff, right? When they initially bombed Rafah back in February, Matt Miller, the spokesperson for the State Department, was like, oh, well, they've been having operations in Rafah. It's not really anything. They haven't actually started.
They have conducted airstrikes against Rafah really since going back to the original days of the campaign. It is not our assessment that this airstrike is the launch of a full-scale offensive happening in Rafah.
So what's this going to be? Oh, well, they haven't actually started it yet. But apparently they have. They've started ground operations, but it's just not a massive full scale. What does that mean? Literally obliterating them and dropping like a nuclear bomb's worth of bombs on them? Come on. Anyway, one fundamental disagreement between the two sides is that Hamas wants a permanent ceasefire while Israel insists on total eradication of Hamas. What have the Palestinian leaders said? Palestinian National Initiative Secretary General Mustafa Barghouti told Al Jazeera on the 15th of March that the latest Hamas proposal is much more flexible and forthcoming compared to the previous one set forth during early and late February. Barghouti said he expects Netanyahu to impose every possible obstacle to prevent this deal from taking place, because he knows that once this war is over, he will be going to prison. Obviously, we saw Chuck Schumer saying, oh, they need a new election. We'll see how it goes. So what is very interesting as well that Secretary Blinken pointed out, as well as this man, I'm not actually sure what his name is, but this journalist pointed out, is humanitarian aid reaching Gaza. So I immediately was like, oh, so did they actually do that? I live in Australia, so we've restarted funding to UNRWA, and I went to go look. And to my utter dismay, the same day he calls for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, demands for more humanitarian aid and making sure that it goes there, as well as a continuation of negotiations between Hamas and Israel, the House of Representatives come up with this. U.S. congressional leaders propose a spending bill that would cut UNRWA funding. Not just a pause, cut. Biden, backed bipartisan legislation to avoid government shutdown, would ban aid for UN agencies for Palestinian refugees. So back in February, if you don't know, there was another bill that was proposed by Congress and that had passed the Senate, by the way. It passed the Senate in order to block funding to UNRWA. So Section 614 of HR 815 states, none of the funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this act, prior acts making appropriations for the Department of State, foreign operations, and related programs may be made available for a contribution, grant, or other payment to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, notwithstanding any other provisions of law. This one has had, like, obviously this was back on the 13th of February that it passed in the Senate. This has not really moved forward at all. It hasn't even been brought to a roll call vote as far as I can tell. So I'm assuming that they're having a huge difficulty actually bringing this forth, okay, and actually passing this. They said it's being blocked by House Republicans or something like that. It's probably because there's so much money that's going to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan. That's what this is attached to, obviously. So now they've come up with a new spending bill. And, let me just say this. I don't know what the tea is, but they keep on hiding stuff. It's fairly difficult. When I initially found this out, I first saw this back at the beginning of February. It was incredibly difficult to find. You don't know what's going on. You see that it's passed in the Senate. You see things, but this was called, at the time, it was called the Relieve Act. Okay. Now it's changed to National Security Act, but it had passed in the House previously. And when you went to go look up the summary for it, it was not saying this, which they've now done. They said that they changed it on the 13th. They have just recently changed that whole, because I saw this and I was looking for ages. It took me ages to find. You have to search all of the freaking websites to find it. But before, it was showing this, like, even on that day, literally weeks later, it was showing this bill expands eligibility for veterans. And you're like, what? Veterans, that's not the bill I'm looking for. I'm looking for something else. So now they're being really tricky with this one. And so there isn't a House resolution number. Okay. It's just saying dash. Okay. So that's very annoying. Anyway, so this is what they're saying. Funding limitations for UNRWA, so United Nations Relief and Works Agency, notwithstanding any further provisions of any other divisions of this act, funds appropriated or otherwise made available by this act or other acts making appropriations for the Department of State, foreign operations, and related programs, including provisions of acts providing supplemental appropriations for the Department of State, foreign operations, and related programs, may not be used for a contribution, grant, or other payment to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, notwithstanding any other provisions of law, for any amount provided in prior fiscal years or in fiscal year 2024, or the amounts provided in fiscal year 2025 until March 25th, 2025. So essentially they're saying, like, any money. So for any amounts provided in prior fiscal years or in fiscal years 2024. So back in January, when they paused funding to UNRWA, they said, oh, we're still going to give them the money that we've already appropriated to them, but the future funds that we're going to send, or the future, like any plans for the future, we're not going to do that. Now this one is specifically stating that they will not provide any more funds to UNRWA for any amounts provided in prior fiscal years or this fiscal year. So it's very important to note this. Whenever the U.S. talks about UNRWA, they say that they are the most equipped and the best organization in order to bring humanitarian aid to Gaza, right? However, they're saying that they're going to block it. Now, they're going to block it. That's diabolical. It's diabolical. Like, as I was mentioning before, there was the HR 815. So it says, but while that bill, which also includes aid to Ukraine, has hit hurdles in the Republican-controlled House, Thursday's bipartisan proposal is likely to be approved on Friday. If the broader funding bill does not pass, several U.S. agencies would start to run out of money Saturday, leading to what is known as a shutdown, which certain functions of the government cease to operate. Under the U.S. Constitution, only Congress can approve money allocated from government functions. In recent years, the threat of shutdowns have become more frequent amid growing partisanship on Capitol Hill, leading to legislative impasses. rights advocates and Western officials have warned that the defunding of UNRWA would exacerbate the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza and destabilize Middle Eastern countries with large Palestinian refugee populations, including Lebanon and Jordan. First and foremost, the worst part about this is that Israel has failed to provide any evidence that the 12 members of the agency were a part of the October 7th attack. That is why pretty much all the other countries have restarted their funding. I just keep on thinking like either, I think it was both of them, but Secretary Blinken standing up there talking about, oh, well, we have, Israel has provided us evidence. They have provided us evidence and it's credible. It's credible. That's why we have to pause it.
The reports that we got last week, and UNRWA brought them to us, were deeply, deeply troubling. We haven't had the ability to investigate them ourselves, but they are highly, highly credible.
But the people, first and foremost, the people had already been fired. So they're gone. But they still stopped it. Secondly, like UNRWA is stating that we don't have any evidence of this happening. And yet, this is still happening. From what I can see here, what I see is, they'll say a win is a win. And this is a win. This is a win. Even if hopefully they get the wording correct and we are able to see the ceasefire that is desperately required there. This is through the efforts of everybody that has been posting, that has been incessantly calling their representatives within the U.S., the international demands that for a ceasefire. This is only the beginning. I want this to be a win, and we need to take the win because it is a win. Just like when the ICJ said that, oh, we will continue with this, didn't do the ceasefire. However, they said that it is plausible that genocide is occurring there. This is kind of that same kind of lukewarm win, but we need to take it as like a shiny example of what it means to be a boots on the ground, direct action type of activist that says this is unconscionable, this is diabolical, this is completely inhumane and unacceptable. And we need to continue to demand and actively demand for justice in Gaza, in Congo, in Sudan, everywhere around the world, in Haiti right now as well. We need to continue to demand for justice and human rights to be granted. If there's anything that happened in Palestine, that's good. And I want to look at it as a silver lining. What it did was galvanize the masses. And I will never forget Joy Behar sitting up there on The View talking about how we're just going to forget about this by next year.
Voters broadly disapprove 57% of the way Biden is handling this bloody, bloody war.
By next year, it'll be over, and then we'll move on to something else.
But the other thing, Joy...
It's next year. We haven't forgotten about it because it's still occurring. They didn't think that we were going to pay attention to this. They thought that we would just forget about it and that this was just a trend. And they try to put whatever else in front of our faces to distract us from what's going on, like Kate Middleton. I do not care what's happening to that white woman. Okay? But they didn't want us to look. Now we see you. And we're not looking away. We're looking at the facts. We're looking at these things. And that's why they're now hiding this stuff. Because they know we can go search it. They know that we'll look up the facts now. Because they're not telling us the truth. Like I said, they have been lying to us. We cannot just sit over here and say, oh, my life is good. No. Every aspect of our lives, we look at it now and we think, oh my God. The women in Gaza, the men in Gaza, the boys in Gaza, the people in Gaza, like, they don't have this. Like, these things I'm taking for granted, these things that I don't even think about. The fact that I get to just get on social media and, I can have a laugh if I want to. I can watch the girl with the dogs. I think that's what girl with the list, girl with the dogs. I can watch those videos of them just doing that. I can sit and I can relax doing that. Whereas they don't even have access to like proper fuel and energy to charge their phones in order to watch it. They're sitting in a tent in the dirt not able to drink water, thirsty, watching this fucking dog getting bathed, water that could be sustaining them, you know? They don't have, like, dehydrated, hungry. She's feeding them treats. Like, it's horrible. Horrible. And I think we need to be uncomfortable for a little while to really bring the change that we need in this world. I think a lot of people are disinterested because they are like, oh, that's just too much for me to think about. Like, it's overwhelming for me. And I'm like, well, it's overwhelming for the people experiencing it. If there's anything to be said, I'm getting very emotional. If there's anything to be said, like, I'm not going to let this go, because it's not just like me as a Black person that, like, their solidarity with Black Americans, amazing. It's important. And their struggle is all of our struggle. Like, none of us will be free until Palestinians are free. And, yeah. None of us are going to be free until we're all free. Period. And I might be living a great life. I have a great lifestyle. But as long as I know somebody else is out there struggling, I'm going to be fighting. And that's the point of this. And I was going to say likes, comment, and subscribe. So inappropriate. But I'm like, that's the point of Avant Tribe. Like, I want to be a new tribe of people that is ready to do and take the necessary action to make the world a better place. Okay? This is for the people. This is a people's channel, people's website, people's community. It's for everybody. Anyway, that's it. I'll leave it there, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.